In recent years, the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene has gained widespread popularity, but does it really deserve it? In this video, I'm going to draw upon my years of experience as a peer-reviewed Ivy League researcher in the behavioral sciences to share 4 problems this book has that you need to know about. And later on, I'll share the best way to use this book to improve the quality of your life that most people overlook. And the first problem is begging the question. In this book, Greene's central claim, the claim upon which every other idea in this book either rests or falls, is the idea all humans are motivated solely by power. But is there really any logic to support this? Well, Greene himself states that those who are opposed to this claim themselves are making a power play. In other words, if you deny that humans are motivated solely by power, then you're only doing this to hide a secret agenda you have to increase your own power. But do you see a tiny, really huge problem here? This is a form of what's called the begging the question fallacy, or more simply put, it's just circular reasoning. To show how incredibly flawed this idea is, let's simply take the extreme opposite of his claim. Instead of claiming people are solely motivated by the pursuit of power, let's instead claim all people are solely motivated by the desire to be moral. Now, just like Greene's claim about power, can you see how this claim also seems to be obviously absurd? However, if you object to this claim and state, for example, I have a desire to be immoral and do bad things, I can simply respond, aha, see, your desire to be immoral and do bad things is simply an example of a moral principle that you hold. And we can apply this same bad reasoning to prove pretty much any claim. All people accept communist values, they just don't realize it yet. All people hold Christian values, they just haven't accepted it yet. All people are actually atheists, they just don't realize it yet, and so on. But understanding the flaws in Greene's logic isn't enough. Later, we'll take a look at what the science has to say about human motivation to see why Greene's idea of power here is fatally flawed. For now, let's look at the second problem with the 48 Laws of Power, and that is equivocation. Did you notice that something was just kind of off with the examples I gave just now, but you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong with them? Well, let's take a look at the first example I gave once again. Essentially, the argument is as follows. All people are solely motivated by the desire to be moral. You are motivated by the desire to be immoral. The desire to be immoral is still just a moral principle. Therefore, all people are solely motivated by the desire to be moral. What's going on here? Well, in order to make this kind of circular argument at least kind of make sense, I have to use a semantic trick called equivocation. That is, I've essentially changed the meaning of the word moral from premise to premise without telling you. Imagine putting a puzzle piece together, but you're missing a piece and are really struggling to find it. Well, all you really have to do to make it fit is cut some random puzzle piece into the shape of the missing one and fit it into the missing space. I'll admit it, I did this a couple times when I was a kid. The problem, well, it's still obviously not the right piece, and this is kind of like how equivocation works. But let's look specifically at how Greene does this with the word power. Okay, so let's look at his central claim. All people are motivated solely by the pursuit of power. You say you are not motivated by power. Claiming you are not motivated by power is a way of asserting power. Okay, so let's back up. There are obviously different ways that we can use the word power. I can use the word power, for instance, scientifically to mean energy transfer over time, as in, the lights are out, I think the power is down. But I could use it in more subtle ways, such as in the sentence, I have a high degree of personal power, versus the phrase, I want to take power and destroy my enemy. These are obviously different meanings of power, and all Greene is doing in order to sound convincing is, at best, purposely and covertly mixing these meanings together. It's kind of like telling my Italian mom you're making spaghetti with tomato sauce for dinner, but the tomato sauce you're eating is from a jar instead of from scratch. I'm sorry guys, they're just not the same thing. In one sense, yes, we can admit all people are motivated by the pursuit of power if we take power simply to mean something like capability or ability to do things. But then this sentence simply becomes something like all people are motivated by the pursuit of the ability to do things. In logic, this is called a tautology, something that is necessarily true but doesn't really have any practical consequence. Greene seems to want to use this true yet useless statement to prove all his claims about his more narrow use of the word power, by which he means something like the ability to control others. By now, are you seeing some of the tricks and power plays that Greene himself is using on you in this book? If not, that's okay. Maybe exploring a little bit of the science behind motivation will help. Which leads us to the third problem with the 48 Laws of Power, namely that there is no scientific evidence for his claims. Now, let's be real. Can we reasonably doubt that people are motivated by power? No, of course not. There's plenty of evidence people are motivated by power. In fact, throughout the book, Greene cites historical example after historical example of people ruthlessly conniving and striving for power, and doing whatever it takes to do so. But is this really evidence that humans are motivated solely by power? Well, decades of research in social psychology have shown this to be false. The reality is people are motivated to react for all sorts of reasons. Love, pleasure, avoidance of pain, security, contribution, sense of belonging, reinforcement of personal identity, and yes, power. In fact, recent research has corroborated numerous similar findings in game theory, showing that humans are highly cooperative. One study, published in 2024 in Scientific Reports, showed that even despite past betrayal, people tend to still desire to cooperate with each other. As the researchers noted, this discovery suggests that humans are more tolerant and cooperative than previously thought. And these findings are not unique. In fact, in biological anthropology, it's a widely acknowledged hypothesis that the very reason humans may have survived as a species through ice ages, population declines, and multiple catastrophes is that we have an evolutionary tendency to cooperate. In other words, the desire to cooperate and the desire for altruism may be literally encoded into our genes. But can't we just reduce all these genetic desires and tendency to the desire for power? No. In fact, research suggests it's probably the opposite. Numerous studies on organizational behavior and power dynamics within organizations seem to suggest that power itself is not even an intrinsic motivation. In 2007, J.A. Simpson explored this deeply in his article Psychological Foundations of Trust. Part of what he noted is that individuals seem to desire power not for its own sake, but out of a sense of insecurity. Think about it. If you're stranded on a desert island with 10 other people and there's limited food, wouldn't you feel a bit insecure as to whether or not you're going to eat? How do you know you could trust the others among the group to be honest and not hoard all the food? The best way in your mind to resolve these feelings of mistrust and anxiety? Try to dominate everyone else and get them to see you as their leader. For thousands of years, humans have operated with these types of insecurities and mistrust, and it's likely that many of the power dynamics we've seen throughout human history have been at least in part due to these factors. Reduce the impact of these factors, and it stands to reason that fewer and fewer of us will be motivated by the impulse to control others. And with the way technology and communication structures have been developing, I envision a future where this is possible. Now, are there instances of people desiring power for its own sake? Yes. According to research, as much as 7% of the population may have what are called dark triad personality traits. Think narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, and those who don't have one of these diagnoses but who fall within some spectrum of these. It's pretty clear among these personality types that the desire for power is a primary motivation, but they are definitely the minority. And so while I've provided some evidence for my views on this, this is precisely the problem with Greene's book. Out of the many pages of the supposed laws that he discusses, there isn't one, not one citation of a specific study, analysis, or any kind of scientific evidence whatsoever to back up his claims. Essentially, Greene simply thought up a set of cherry-picked ideas that sounded good and then somehow got famous for it. But then why is this all a problem anyway? It's just a book, right? Well, that takes us to the fourth problem with the 48 Laws of Power, which is misguided action. Online, you'll find dozens of comments from people discussing how much of a genius Greene is and how this book reveals the truth about humanity we don't want to hear. But as we've clearly shown so far, it's very far from the truth. The problem, though, is this is presented as a self-help book, and it's meant as a guide for action. Let's face it, many of us are cynical. We've faced bad situations in our lives, we've dealt with unfairness, and we may have even witnessed people acting in incredibly evil ways toward us or others. And so when we first look into this book, it's easy for us to have the simplistic response, aha, I knew it, people are like this, and Greene is exposing the truth. And without realizing it, you've fallen into a cognitive bias called selection bias. You're seeing only what you want to see, and because of this, you will now unknowingly filter out anything that conflicts with this worldview. And worse yet, you'll now act on these supposed laws. For example, Law 1, never upstage the boss, and Law 2, take credit for others' work. 2 points Stephen Covey and others who write about leadership easily disprove. Law 14, seem like a friend but be a spy. A point easily dismissed by understanding the evolutionary advantages of cooperation. Law 34, act like royalty. A point we can easily disprove by understanding the fundamentals of game theory and social choice theory. These laws are all incredibly cynical. Stanford University professor of psychology Jamil Zaki has pointed out the many problems associated with cynical thinking in his recent article, Instead of Being Cynical, Try Becoming Skeptical. Not only does cynicism lead to potential mental health issues, but because cynics tend to have a very distorted view of others' motivations, they tend to make choices that are actually against their own interests in the long term, and even worse, cynicism seems to actually make us dumber. In several large-scale studies, it's been shown that people with cynical views tend to perform worse on tests of cognitive ability, problem solving, and mathematical skill. And do you really want all of this to happen to you? So then if this book contains such huge fatal flaws, then what's the true value of it? Well, let's think of it this way. The desire for power is absolutely one of the many human motivations, and so understanding all the historical examples he offers throughout the book of princes, kings, and rulers is genuinely useful if for only one reason, so that we can easily recognize when someone else is trying to manipulate us or act in deceptive ways towards us. So, in other words, don't read this book as a roadmap for your own action. You'll just end up with a life you regret. Instead, read the book and use it to recognize potentially toxic qualities in yourself and to make the world around you a better place. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact not only on your own life, but also in the lives of countless others, then be sure to watch this next video.